There are a lot fewer two-parent families.
What's worth more, a dollar today or a dollar tomorrow?
Almost nobody gets out of love alive.
Prisoners' rights is out of sight, out of mind.
Is your brain on God?
You ain't ready to oppose.
There are discussions
how
as
they thought
black families have to have them.
What's worth more, a dollar today or a dollar tomorrow? What's worth more, a dollar today or a dollar tomorrow?
But now, I wanted to go back to the villain part that you were talking about, Dean, because I thought that part was interesting, especially when you talk about, the underdog and everything. I didn't look at him as a villain in that sense. So, and if I did, you're going to classify him a villain. I was on his side, so to speak, cheering on what it was, and I can see from both sides. I can see Wakanda's, you know, the way that it was presented. This is a sacred place, and what's it called? Vibranium. That's the metal.
Yeah.
No one's supposed to really know that they're rich in this resource. So I understand why they were trying to keep as many people out as possible, whether they come from, whether they're descendants of slaves or not. I understand. I understand what it was that they were trying to do. But again, on Michael B. Johnson's side, Killmonger's side, I do definitely appreciate what he was trying to do.
And as an African American, I think that is probably why a lot of people did. But what's funny? Just real quick, because you're talking about the feelings, and oddly enough, because when Ray was talking about how you're going to see this in politics, in a way you kind of have, because I hear a lot of people, well, not a lot, but I've heard a few people refer to T'Challa, which is a Black Panther character, as Obama.
Thank you.
Right, and that made me think about.
I didn't hear that.
I heard that quite a few times, actually.
Yeah.
But there was one especially that made me think about it in a specific way. It was Antonio Moore, which we discussed before, and Yvette Campbell.
Yvette Carnell.
Yvette Carnell. I'm sorry, I apologize. Yvette Carnell, and they referred to it, but they also said how in some ways, as Obama and in Obama's status, Obama, being a mixed race, being, born, even though it's American place, being born in Hawaii, have Kenyan parents, not necessarily being able to understand a Black American play. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that specifically because I read an article like a couple of years ago. I think this is when Obama was coming out about it was in reference to Ta-Nehisi Coates, who had did a couple of articles with Obama, but one specifically when Obama has said how he felt in some ways why he was able to get what he was able to get to because he was able to relate to white people differently. For the fact that he's come from a mixed background, that he had white grandparents, so he sees those as the same people. He sees the trinkets on the fireplace. It's the same thing that reminds him when he's growing up, right? So to take to your point, when I think about that, and I mix T'Challa in it, and I mix somebody, who's a king, just getting into that king role because his father died, compared to Killmonger, who is trying to make things happen and trying to create a world. There's only two ways, only two references in that film that you have to go. Anybody cannot relate necessarily to being a king or having that royalty status. Mm-hmm. We could relate to us trying. We could relate to us trying to get a better life, getting as much resources as we can by any way that we can, using whatever resources. Because mind you, he was also trained by America. He was trained by that same CI person. When they first started looking at Killmonger, and they said who it is, the CIA guy said that's one of us. Meaning that he was trained by us, but he used his training, used whatever he had to get to where he had to get to. And that's something that we could relate to more than somebody up top that isolate themselves from anybody else. Keep it up.
Well, I tell you, so it shouldn't be a surprise why I was able to identify a little bit with that, because that's exactly how I feel about things. if I had to, if the only because it was a movie, you understand it had to be him trying to kill people or whatever. But um, Ray, question:
Mm.
how about the inspiration side of things, the motivation side of things? If you got people sitting down, really not doing anything, not doing shit, and then all of a sudden they see, and we talked about this in Black Celebrity about seeing yourself through celebrities and people just because they look like you or whatever. But if someone can draw some inspiration from this movie, even with the fact that you consider it a slap in the face in the sentence of slaves, if a descendant of slave can look at this movie and draw some inspiration, would it not be worth it?
Listen, man, I can't control that. God is in charge of that. So God inspires.
Mm-hmm.
So if this can be used to inspire, then by all means.
Mm-hmm.
I can't legislate. I can't regulate that.
Right.
So I never know. We never know how something is going to hit anybody. So I wouldn't stand in the way of that.
Mm-hmm.
Based on how I've grown up in America and what I've been allowed to see, that movie, that whole thing is just offensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, it makes me wonder. No, I don't even wonder anymore. It confirms for me that most of us, or too many of us, let me say that, too many of us don't understand what our bloodline means. The film told you. You don't even have to interpret. It's not even an abstract. They told you in the movie, your bloodline won't let you in here. When Michael B. Jordan was explaining to Lupita Nyong'o, she dismissed him as a Black American or American Black.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until he narrated his bloodline. Bloodline equals claim. We need to understand this. Bloodline equals claim. This is what that's talking about. It wasn't referring to, oh, you don't think like us. No, the blood in your veins is not the same as ours. That's what they said, and they didn't hide it. And I'm thankful for them saying it because it just proves my case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The bloodline, we don't get what it means to have this bloodline. This bloodline makes you exceptional because everyone except you is welcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to understand this.
Right.
Other folks will be accepted except you. So we got to understand the bloodline in you. What I saw here was more about the feeling of inferiority that we've inherited from what I would consider, if you could Google this, maternal abandonment syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Maternal abandonment syndrome. When I look at our behavior, I'm just sitting there watching us. I was watching the audience just as much as the movie. And I saw people who were so eager to reconnect with their mothers. Now, let's just be honest here. I know I'm going to get hate mail.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I'm not even on social media because I don't even want to talk to anybody.
Right.
But I know this is going to sound foul, but I'm just going to say it anyway. As much as Europeans came in there and got us, okay, some of them came in there and stole us. Some of them came in there and bought us too. That's an ugly truth.
Yeah, indeed.
It's an ugly truth. Yeah, the European was a devil that came in there and did whatever and unleashed horrors, unprecedented. But our mother wasn't living right either. She wasn't living all that clean. Listen, it's one thing for somebody to break in this house, kill everybody, and take my child away. It's another thing if I leave the door open and take $10 from them and say, go ahead in there. Now let's get to that.
Well, so
we don't want to deal with that. And that says something about our emotional and mental state. more so about our emotional state, which is why these emotional appeals bring us out. Bring us out to support. Standing up in the theater, applauding on some emotional stuff, not even reading the message. And it wasn't even anything you had to decode. They told you your bloodline is not accepted here.
Right.
So if we could understand and accept our bloodline as what makes us exceptional, talking about Black excellence, what if we lived for 400 years? We've been living out Black excellence already. The Black excellence that I saw came from my wife's best friend, one of her best friends, who's a Delta. They bought 2 theaters to show the movie to children, to everyone, but especially to young people. That's Black excellence. I want to talk about that. I don't need to get in an imaginary trip back to a Neverland that never existed to see Black excellence. We've already lived it out because I accept my slave blood as something that makes me exceptional. That's why that's where I'm at in my development. And if anything, my conversation for my people is, let's get past this low self-esteem stuff, where you stand up and applaud movies that insult you. That was crazy. And I'm looking, I've never been more embarrassed. I've never been more embarrassed for us than I looked. I sat there, everyone standing up applauding. I'm the only one in my row sitting down. I'm looking at everybody like, what are you doing?
So Ray, okay, so let me ask this question. All right. You see it as an insult, okay. But for people who don't see this as insulting, what do you think of them? What do you think of the people who don't find this movie as insulting? Like, could there be a conscious mind who saw this movie, took it for what it was, and didn't get the same reaction as far as the insulting part that you did? Could there be a conscious person out here who could just take the movie for what it is?
Absolutely.
Can I answer that after Ray's done?
Indeed.
Absolutely, man. I mean, come on. What makes life what it is that we all have different ways of thinking. I mean, we all have different ways of thinking. And the way that movie vibrated in me may not be the way it vibrated in someone that sat next to me. You know? So that's
but
what
you're
it
saying
is.
even though they share the same struggle is what I'm saying, or same experience. I should say experience the same struggle.
Yes.
Okay. Got you.
Because we're at different places. Because we're at different places. Like today, right, which is a good thing, I think, anyway. Today you have on YouTube what they call the so-called Black conscious community, right? When I listen to their language, I see myself 30 years ago when I entertained fantasies about African identity, Black medallions, the conscious bookstores and all of that, learning. This is me growing from a young person into an adult. But 30 years later, after having traveled and been to the continent twice, and not just there on some tourist stuff, I'm there enjoying high-level access and having serious conversations about what's going on. Before that, I was already prepped. Before my first visit, I was already prepped for what was going on there. All of those fantasies, I'm standing here 30 years later telling us, those fantasies they're not real. We need to have if we have a few more minutes, if you could add it on, maybe we can start talking about addressing some of these fantasies.
Right.
They need to be torn apart. Go ahead, Dane.
Yeah. So basically, yeah. Go ahead. As far as conscious, could there be a conscious individual out there that saw this movie, took it for what it was, and did not consider this to be a slap in the face of the Senate?
I mean, quite a few, because there's so many parts in that movie that people take apart that you can see good or bad within the whole movie. So there's a few that I hear tore the whole movie apart. There's a few that I hear they find good pieces in it. The thing about it, but that's kind of why I like this movie. That's kind of why I like, and this is me speaking as an artist. You know, this kind of nods to a genre coming up called Afrofuturism, which basically looks at Black people in the future, usually through fantasy, through you know, an altered reality. The thing I like about it though is that it first of all, it puts us in the future, right? It puts us in a future that before, and if you've seen older films, you don't see yourself. You've never seen yourself, and it starts with that representation. But it also nods to the past, which, you know, the past here being Africa, which I agree. I agree with Ray completely that, you know, we were sold as far as even being captured, and not even that. On top of being sold into slavery, you could have been a slave in Africa yourself, right? Because they had slavery there before slavery was even here. So a lot of it to me nods to also learning your past, which also is a powerful thing because this movie leads itself to that because it has references with that with the architecture. It is a hodgepodge of different African aspects to it. Even with the female guard, there's actually there was actually female hunters that was in Benin, I believe, or Belize. I forget exactly which one. That is there that actually did hunt and was that would protect the ruler of that place. So there are historical references that you could teach it, but that's not for the movie to do. That's for everybody else to do. That's for you to actually teach that person. I remember yesterday, especially, somebody told me that their daughter watched it, and she wants to live in Wakanda, and I told her you should teach your child to build their own Wakanda, and that's what it is to me. That's where it starts. This is the starting point. You don't let it end there. This is just a starting.
So here we go. We were talking about in the last Black Celebrity segment about mobilization and what's going to inspire mobilization. And this is, I go back, I'll say, what if a movie like a Black Panther inspires people to mobilize to do something other than what they've been doing before? What you say, Ray? Next year? 400 years since we've been here?
Next year, 400 years.
Next year, 400 years since we've been here. And so you tell me, are in, you know, chattel slavery aside, are we better off now than we were then? As far as policy.
You can't put chattel slavery aside, ever.
No, and here's what I'm saying. Well, no, okay, right. You know, and you know me, man. But the reason I put that is because if you just pose that question to someone who's not a descendant of the slave, they'll say to you, "Well, shit, back then you were getting hung, beat, and had to pick cotton. Now you can go to school, get education, and be a billionaire." So I say it that way, just so that. Right. People who just on the surface want to say, of course, it's a better situation now, would dig a little deeper. That's why I asked that question.
I would say absolutely. In relative terms, yes. I can wake up in the morning, the things that I'm able to do with my child, I would have been murdered for. Just on that level. The things that I'm able to do, okay, I'm able to, my child knows 2 alphabets, English and Arabic. Not just know the alphabet, can actually read a little bit, you know. The things that I'm able to do as far as establishing her early life, I would have been murdered for those things. I would have been murdered for those things, you know. So absolutely, man, you know, we have definitely been blessed with a better situation, you know, with a better situation. But and again, we still have to be vigilant. We have to be watching, and that's when I'm concerned, because these fantasies are run amok, and our political situation is deteriorating. Not only is it deteriorating, these fantasies and images end up influencing our politics. For example, I can admit that I made a huge mistake voting for Barack Obama for the reasons I voted for him. I made a terrific mistake because, just in being all honest, I wasn't watching the way I should have been watching. I saw what? An image of somebody who looked like me. Okay? Didn't come from my lineage, wasn't a concern for me. Just an image was enough to make me not watch. This is a problem, and it keeps happening. So I use that as an example of how we get caught out there. And I can see it getting ready to happen again, you know. And I'm just wondering, you know, how we see ourselves. Do we see ourselves? Are we aware of our bloodline and what that means in 2019, coming up on 19? It's still real, even though we're in a better situation.
So okay, so for the people, right? Maybe you have So for the people who do not understand the importance of the bloodline, tell them why they should give a shit. Tell them why they should give a shit, right? Because if they don't understand the purpose, that's how they can get confused with something like Black Panther. So tell them why. Tell them why them identifying with their bloodline is critical to their survival.
This bloodline matters because, like I said before, and I don't want to I want to talk about the president and not keep going back. But when Reconstruction was finished, when it was overturned, the ex-slaveholders never lost sight of the goal. The goal was those that we used to own, we are going to forever, as long as we're here, we're going to maintain them in a perpetual state of denial. Denial of what? Access to resources. Okay? You have to understand this. What resources am I talking about specifically? Land, wealth, education. Why resources? Resources because in America, resources make your citizenship real. Segregation was not about, I don't want to sit next to you on the bus just because of the color of your skin. Segregation, as far as those buses were concerned, was transportation is a resource that makes citizenship real. That's just in the context of segregation on buses. It was more than, I don't want to sit next to you because of the color of your skin. It was about denying citizens the resources. And we have to understand our bloodline, despite that, we were made citizens. We have to understand what happened when we became legal citizens under the 14th Amendment. The pushback against that has never stopped since 1868. It's never stopped. Why? Because it's your bloodline. Okay? There's a quote that I have from one of the books. If I had planned on pulling this up, I would have had it up, pardon me. But the senator basically said, the Negro doesn't excite antagonism from whites because of the color of his skin. It is because he is a citizen. That's the point. They don't hate us because of the color of our skin necessarily. It's because we are citizens on top of having this bloodline. They don't want to share the resources with anyone from this bloodline. This is why this bloodline matters. And if you fail to understand that this bloodline is still considered, if you fail to understand that, then your politics is off. You can't get it. It's off. Immigrant Africans were not framed out of this system because of their bloodline. They don't share this slave blood. They don't share it. So as a consequence, if you look up in Harvard, I saw an article recently. It talked about the amount of black faces in Harvard. Most of them aren't us. They're immigrant Africans. Because when they come here with more wealth than to start off with than us anyway. So this is a consequence. Just one example of a consequence. So if you fail to understand this bloodline, if you fail to understand the role that it plays, then your politics is off because you're not going to see the okie doke. And when I saw this movie, I'm like, oh, you know. So this thing, it goes on, but these fantasies is something that I wanted to touch on. You know, we gotta put these things to bed, man. In the context of Wakanda, I'm not talking about killing our imagination. No, I'm not talking about killing our imagination. I'm talking about these fantasies when they run amok to the point where they threaten our survival. We got to address this. We have to address these things. The fantasies that many of us have about, because I was watching the some of the commentary on this movie, and without calling any names, because I'm not going to launch any YouTube beeps. These are people who are basically talking in abstract terms that are full of a lot of emotional hot air. That's basically what they're talking. They're just talking about this movie and how it promotes the culture. What culture? What are you talking about? I had a culture here in America in the ghetto. You know what I mean? I had a culture here already. What culture are you talking about? My culture was already moving forward. Why? Because I accept my blood. I'm not trying to escape this. So there's a lot of escapism going on here. And this movie is bringing up, I feel like, it's bringing up a lot of emotional baggage. It's bringing up a lot of emotional issues. And I'm watching this thing. And these fantasies are dangerous, man. They're dangerous.
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha. No. Because I want to give Dane an opportunity to, because this fantasy thing, very interesting. I want to give him an opportunity to kind of weigh in. What do you think? What do you think about what Rain is saying as far as the fantasies and stuff and how we need to get away from
well, I mean, I don't have a problem with the fantasy itself because, being an artist and an animator, that's kind of how I plan on making my money. I think the problem, the last thing he said was emotional baggage. There's a lot of emotional baggage with this film. And I see that. And I see it especially when you juxtapose it against, a lot of things always leaning more towards the European side of history and of everything that we kind of learn and not seeing anything on the African side. I see a lot of that weighing on this one film. When it comes to that, I agree with him completely, because if you leave it just right here, you leave it on this film, then you haven't done anything, right? Right now, you haven't really done anything. If you just take this film for what it is, if you don't go on to the steps and go on to learning what is actually happening in the culture, the fact that they nodded to, in the movie anyway, not throughout the Black Panther franchise, they nodded to Oakland and 1992 Oakland and nodded to the poverty. You see that automatically when they're playing basketball in a milk crate.
Milk crates, right?
And nodded to, them talking about creating this revolution. They nodded to that. But if you don't teach people the actuality of what really happened at that time, or what really, California itself has always exploded. How many riots have we had there? You know what I mean? That was the birth of the Black Panther Party. When you don't teach any of that, you don't teach them about the African culture. If you want to do that, if you don't teach them anything, then yeah, that's why I completely agree where you failed to take any good that's within this movie and putting it to actual light, because you're always going to be blinded. And I don't even think this movie itself is that harmful compared to everything else that we have learned throughout the world. When I think about, when he was mentioning it, and I was thinking about Jane Elliott, which I don't know if anybody know Jane Elliott, which I'm pretty sure y'all do, who did the blue eye, brown eye experiment. She also had a video, anybody want to check it out, where she was on, I think it was Oprah Winfrey way back in the day. And she was showing how the map, in the map, how Africa is cut in such a way that it looks way smaller than it actually is, where it made America look bigger than Africa, which we all know Africa is way bigger than America is. And in that way, kind of subliminally teaching you that America is superior, just by scale, by sky, just by size. You know, and we've seen this with the way that school is taught. Even now, there's still fights about, you know, how slavery is depicted in a lot of history books. You know, you see a lot of that where I don't necessarily um, disapprove, or I can't say I'm in full alignment, but I can't say that some of the cultural references that people are trying to pull out of it or trying to say this signifies is wrong. But if this is where it stays, then you're completely wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask the question about the stars, the black stars in the movie. Do you guys have an opinion on them for playing the roles that they played in the movie? Um, and basically those characters and how they were viewed by the public, right? Do you have any issues with you know celebrities, or let's just say these actors taking role in a film like this, knowing you feel that it's you consider it a slap in the face to the descendants of slaves? How do you feel about the actors that are in there?
Well, again, I don't want to make it really about them, even though it's easy to.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to do, but I don't know. At with the state, the situation for black actors right now, and their ability to get work, I'm not going to come down on them for that. They had to. They got some work.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
However, um, you do have to question. You have to question. Well, me anyway. I have to question. What did you see when you read these lines? What did you see? You know. What did you see? And that's the only question that I have, because I was listening to one of the actors give commentary, and I was listening, and again, I'm not going to be disrespectful because I love this person, but
Mm-hmm.
I said to myself, you know what? I can't use a word she said. I can't use any words that came out of her mouth because they were all going nowhere. Just a bunch of steam. There's a bunch of emotional steam, and I'm like, I love you, but nah, I can't use anything you just said.
I'm sitting here thinking, man, and because I'll date back to the black celebrity clip, man. I'll go a little further, man. When I look at a film like this, man, and the actors and actresses that are in there, the black actors and actresses that are in there, I start thinking about, my upbringing, and just where what it is that I went through as a child. Not having my, father around at a young age, being with distant relatives at a young age, trying to figure out who the hell I was at a very early age, and not having anyone in my immediate circle to kind of, bounce ideas off of, or even, look at them and say, okay, this is the way maybe I'm supposed to be. That was a struggle for me. It was a real struggle. So, um, when I told you that I've taken a lot from black celebrities, is because that's what I saw. Remember, you said at one time you used to think that black celebrities were responsible for helping people out, and then you said that was a problem. But I'm talking about at that point in your life, when you believed that that's what black celebrities were supposed to be doing. Was there any black celebrity at that time that decided you wanted to pattern yourself after, or looked at some of the things that they did to get to where they were, and it assisted you in any way in your life? Hopefully, a few years down the line, you realize that, yeah, maybe looking at it that way is really not a good way to look at it, but because I was inspired to do more. And once I was inspired to do more and wind up doing more, got a little more conscious, realized I won't teach, a youngster to do it necessarily that way, unless they're keeping their mind focused and they know exactly where they want to go, bro. So I look at a film like this and I see all these black actors in there, man, and and I see, I don't know what kind of contracts they sign, what kind of cuts they're getting from this stuff, but when you start seeing the numbers that it's putting up, of course, Marvel made millions or whatever, but it's just nice to see them working, nice to see them on screen where descendants of slaves, whether they are misguided or not, can go to to theater and actually see this stuff. Ray, I really believe that that is important, man. As much as you know how you explain that we see ourselves through black celebrity because we didn't have the political representation, but you know, be that as it may, I personally find a lot of value in looking at their past and stuff. Um, so I asked you about how you felt about them taking these particular roles or whatever, um, because what if they have the same views as you do? Like um, maybe they did feel that way and put their financial situation, ahead of that moral stuff. But Dane, let me ask you, man. Could you, I mean, if we go back to the black celebrity situation, now that I brought that up, can you find any value in a black celebrity's path, especially from the eyes of youngsters?
It's yeah, but that's not really the problem with me. The problem falls under when the majority of our exposure um to a like we talked about culture before, like if you grew up in the ghetto or you grew up
Mm-hmm.
not able to gain as much resources or in poverty, and this is your only escape out of that is when you see this person on the box or you hear him on the radio, and you don't see anything else. You don't see any scientists, you don't see any teachers, you don't see any true politicians that is it really saying anything that captures onto you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I find a problem. I don't find a problem within the actual idea of a black celebrity itself. I find a problem with there is no branching out of us as human beings, period, within in American culture, and the fact that there is more than that, and we need more than that. We need more than entertainers, and not shitting on anybody, but we definitely need more than that because that's the only way we're gonna come out of it. Like if we have more of that,
I got
and
you.
who's more geared towards people. So
Okay.
that's my fault with it.
Let's okay. Let me go ahead and just sum it up with this: the whole fantasy and like the whole idea of I want to go to Wakanda. I'm seeing these hashtag Wakanda all over the place. The reason I mention youngsters, right, and is can you find any value for the youngsters because these young people now watching this movie, right?
All right.
What it is that they're getting out of this movie. Even though us at the point that we are a little more conscious and we kind of understand some of the things that we see in it, for that young individual, right,
Yeah.
who may be completely oblivious to the shit that we're talking about right now, they're finding inspiration with the idea of Wakanda.
And I find that with the art, that's the art. And I don't have no problem with the art. The art to me is fine, but is you got to interpret that art into real life and to make any kind of impact. Like you have colleges now that study Biggie lyrics
I don't want to.
and Tupac lyrics, and you got what Nas and Ninth Wonder and all these other people that take residencies at these and Questlove at these Harvard and all these other Ivy League colleges, and they're interpreting the art to people so that you learn from the art. So it's not just left there.
And
So that's the art. And that's why I say I separate. And I say the same thing, black celebrity. I separate the art from the artist sometimes because sometimes those are two different things.
okay,
You know what
but again, so now I know you mentioned at the collegiate level, but I'm talking about youngsters.
But that's us.
We can
That's me and you. That's me and you. We do that then instead of the professors. We the ones that
again, and that's the reason why I put out my personal situation because I wanted to present this in a way to where it's I don't the same way that we ended up looking to celebrities, um, because we didn't have the political representation. It was out of necessity. You didn't have anything else. You didn't have anything else. So even at this point for this youngster, and that's why I say youngster, because I'm not talking about us. I mean, we're conscious and we can see some things, but I'm talking about this age because this age is important to me. the adolescent years. That's the important stage for me, especially now that I'm dealing with a 14-year-old man. My youngest son is 11, but the 14-year-old right now. This is the part of his life where I think his brain is the most open right now. And inspiration is hard to come by sometimes. So I don't want to like down the Black Panther movies like this. Because I know there's some child out there that's drawing some positive inspiration, is going to do great things simply because of what they're feeling behind the movie. You understand? And it's critical at this point because they're not seeing it from the policy and the history side that we are right now. They're seeing it from something different right now at this stage. And that's really the reason why I stress this. I thought that Black Panther was a great movie. Action, great storyline. I do understand how it invokes some real emotional feelings. I get that. But after we walked out of the theater, we're back to reality, and we got to go ahead and continue our lives. But, you know, folks, listen, man, this has been a great show. And I want to thank my man Ray, because always brings the history, and he brings a perspective that, you know, we definitely need to hear more. Also, my man DB, he's always here, cool, calm, collected. I'm G Cleve. You guys check the description box for any of that information that we talked about. Reality Gurus. Take care.